Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs today, and I want to talk about it and incorporate the channel into it because it's 6 years ago that the Toronto Maple Leafs win the draft lottery, and it is at that point that this channel started to become what it is now. Now, the interesting thing is it's kind of false advertising too, right? Because I was not happy with the draft lottery. I was so exhausted with the over. I felt over coverage of a Toronto Maple Leafs team that finished at the bottom of the standings. 29, 42, and 11, 69 points, and it just felt like they were being covered more than anything. And this idea that Shanahan had this whole tear down and build it up plan, and can't wait to see how it turns out kind of thing. And I was just kind of spent on it. And so when they won the draft lottery, I realized my worst fears were going to come true. It was going to be all Austin Matthews in Toronto all summer. And it was just going to be everything Matthews all summer and Toronto all summer. And it was. But something started to change between 2016 and 2017. I became the hockey guy. I changed from just being Shannon, some guy that just, old man yelling at a cloud at his webcam, and I became the hockey guy. And I started watching more of not just teams I cheered for, but everybody. I used to subscribe to the NHL Center Ice package so I could watch Boston and Dallas. It wasn't so I could watch every team. Sure, I'd tune into the odd Kings game. I might tune in and watch a game between two teams I didn't really care about. But in general, I wanted to watch Boston and Dallas, and I felt like it was a reasonable price for me to be able to watch Boston games and Dallas games because, if the Canucks aren't in the playoffs, I don't need to watch their games. There was definitely seasons I watched maybe 2/3 of the Canucks games rather than all of them. So things have definitely changed from where they were then. Now, what that does too, and I've talked about this, is it softens your hate and it softens your love for teams as well. So like yesterday's a good example. Carolina is beating Boston. And I can tell when it's 2-0, I thought, Boston's not winning this. I didn't get upset. I would have. 2016 me would have been beside himself. Upset that, they just could not win on the road in game 7. They lost all 4 on the road and now, no. Following everything the way that I do, I felt like Carolina was the better team. Did I wish Boston had won? Sure. Would Boston have gotten any further than the second round? It's debatable. It really would have depended on whether or not it was the Rangers or the Penguins. On some level, I was thinking, man, if it's Boston and Pittsburgh, that could be an interesting comment section under those videos. But hey, because there are people who hate both teams. It's a black and gold thing, right? So, no, people know exactly why they hate Boston or why they hate Pittsburgh. But Toronto's going through this transformation as the channel's doing the rising up, and all of a sudden I'm getting subscriber numbers that I think are ridiculous. So 2017, they had a good year, and they finished with 40 wins, which was more than was expected. They were expected to get better from that 29 wins. They were expected to get better from the 69 points. 95 points was high, so 40, 27, and 15. And then they lost in the first round against the Washington Capitals in 6, as was expected. They were not favorites that year. They weren't expected to go any further than that first round. Now, they won games 2 and 3. So they did have a 2-1 series lead, which got people excited, and then they lost the next 3. And this is definitely part of the storyline with the Leafs. But for me personally, some of that dislike I had from 2016 disappeared. Not completely. Definitely not completely, but some of it was gone. So 2018. Again, just from a personal standpoint, this is the season where Vegas comes in. The channel really blows up completely, and we're rocking. I'm with Yvonne, and everything's going well for me personally. And so a lot of the rough edges you see in 2016 are gone by 2018. And for the Leafs, sort of the same thing. They had a really good year: 49, 26, and 7 for 105 points. So 49 wins, 105 points. Those are pretty good totals. But they lost in the first round in 7 games against Boston. And this is where the pain comes into it for Toronto fans, right? They won games 3, 5, and 6. So they were behind. They ended up fighting their way back. They tied the series. And I was genuinely, in 2018, concerned that Boston could blow it. I thought, you know what? That this absolutely could go against Boston. I watched Boston in 2010 blow a 3-0 series lead against Philadelphia, which really ruined my day for about a week. But and that's the other difference. It used to be that if a team I cheered for got knocked out and it was something heartbreaking like that, I was out of it for a few days. I mean I was still at work and everything, but I wasn't necessarily pleasant. I would tell people, look, not in a good mood today. That was crap. That I'm not, and I wouldn't use that word. I'd use all kinds of other words. There were a lot of colorful metaphors in my language at that point. But losing in 7 against Boston, I thought they still made progress. And this is the thing, right? 2017 they make progress, 2018 they did as well. 2019 they finished 46, 28 and 8, 100 points. And I didn't think they were as sharp in 2019 as they were in 2018. But they lose in 7 again. Now what's interesting with this series was they won games 1, 3 and 5. So this is a pattern that's repeated this season. And so they were up 3-2. I expected them to beat Boston. I expected them to win in game 6 or 7. I even remember picking them to beat Boston. I thought, yeah, no, they're due. They lost in 2013. They lost in 2018. They're due for a measure of revenge. Similar to how I felt about Carolina going into that series with Boston. Like, yeah, Boston's taken them out a couple times. They're probably pretty ornery about it. Makes sense if Carolina takes Boston out. So when Boston knocked them out in 7, I was genuinely surprised. And then, of course, Boston went on a run all the way to the Stanley Cup final. 2020, shortened season due to the pause. 70 games played by Toronto, 36, 25 and 9 record, 81 points. They were not as sharp in 2020 as they had been in previous years. And we get to after the pause, you have a qualifying round. They lost in 5 games against Columbus. It was a series they never had a lead. They won games 2 and 4. So Columbus wins 1, 3, and 5. Now all of those are in Toronto. So you can look at that and say they lost at home, but number of fans in attendance, right? So there's that. So 2020 was a rough go. This was the first year you can look at, I think, and say, well, Toronto choked. So if you want to look at it from a perspective of Toronto choking it, I thought that was the first year you could look at and say, yeah, that kind of looks like a choke. Then 2021, 56-game season, and all Canadian division. They finished 35, 14, and 7, 77 points. They are dominant. And of course, all the naysayers would come out with, but it's just the Canadian teams, so they weren't really playing the tough teams. They weren't playing Tampa. They weren't playing Florida. They weren't playing Carolina, the Islanders, who had a great year. All of that, right? And there's some validity to that, but it also undercuts what I thought was some pretty competitive hockey in the Canadian division. So when they lost in that first round against Montreal, I don't know how many people saw that coming. There were some, definitely. There are those who will, no matter what happens with Toronto, find fault and find reason to hate all that is Toronto. I'm not there anymore. Because by the time we reach 2021 and they're against Montreal, I will genuinely cheer for Toronto against Montreal. That is the truth. And yet, and I was rooting for them against Columbus as well in 2020. So when they lost that in 7, that hurt. That and I say that because not that it hurt me personally, but I think it hurt the team. They won games 2 through 4. So they lose game 1, famously lose John Tavares. They rallied around that and they win game 2, game 3, and game 4. They win 3 in a row. They should have won 5. They should have. They were at home. They should have won game 5. Now, it's not a full building. Odd circumstances, I think, definitely were one thing. But a lot of it was here. And if you've watched the All or Nothing mini-series on Amazon with the Leafs, you could see that a lot of it is mental. That as soon as something would go wrong in the game, their body language would change. And it was from the coach on down. The body language was one of, oh. And they could be ahead 3-0, and as soon as it's 3-1, it's not this is happening again. It's like, wait, why are they reacting like that? So now there might be creative editing in there too. Certainly, my wife and I have watched some reality TV where we go, that reaction shot doesn't look like it matches that setting. So I don't know that so there are times where I'm watching documentaries that I say, eh. But anyways, that was a tough one because Montreal does go on a run to the Stanley Cup final, which shows that if Toronto had gotten past Montreal, maybe they would have done. Now, of course, people will come out and say, well, no, they're the Leafs. They can't. And until the Leafs do it, those people have no reason to think that they're wrong. Until the Leafs get out of the first round, none of them have any reason to change their opinion. But again, for me personally, 5 years later, I'm looking at this and saying, okay, Toronto needs to get better. They have to, and I mean in the playoffs, they have to get better. So this year, They finished 54, 21, and 7, 115 points. They set records across the board. And when they draw Tampa Bay in the first round, that's tough. Tampa Bay, two-time defending Stanley Cup champions. Toronto played them as well as I think anybody could have in that first round. If Tampa Bay had played Florida, I don't know that Florida would have beat them. The way Florida was spotting leads to Washington, if they had done that against Tampa, I don't know that Florida gets out of the first round, and maybe we're having a discussion of 1996 all over again, right? And I'm going to do that video too on Florida. 1996 and how long that takes. And that's 8 years longer than Toronto's been waiting. And I don't think Toronto fans are going to be all that happy if it takes 8 more years. Now, how you get to this when it comes to the management structure, Brendan Shanahan was hired on April 11th of 2014. He had a good job at the NHL, working with player safety, and he worked with the NHL head offices. And he decides to take on the challenge of trying to bring a Stanley Cup to Toronto. And I commend him for doing a good job of making this team pretty darn good within a few years of him coming in. May 11th, 2018, Kyle Dubas was hired as the general manager. He becomes the general manager. Lou Lamoriello would be pushed aside. And so we get into some contracts that people like, some contracts that people don't. And whether or not these guys end up being overpaid is all a matter of opinion, but that conversation's still out there, and I would imagine we'll still be having it into next season as well. And then November 20th of 2019, Mike Babcock was let go, and they promote Sheldon Keefe from the AHL in order to run the team. And so this is where you get into what is now, I think, the final stage of what Toronto was trying to do. It felt like Sheldon Keefe was meant to be brought in as the head coach. That's why they had him with the Marlies. And I think there was a team wanted to talk to him, and Toronto didn't okay that. Anyways, they clearly had earmarked him as the next coach of the Leafs, which has to be tough when you're an NHL coach and you know your replacement's being, basically prepared in the minors. So yeah, Keefe gets promoted. I think Keefe's done a decent job. I don't know how much of this I would put on Keefe. I think Kyle Dubas made good changes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I thought they were a better team this year than last year. They certainly brought in guys I like, whether it's Kasha, whether it's Kampf. Giordano, I thought, decent addition at the deadline. And I think they made all the right moves. They just ended up against a Tampa Bay team that's two-time defending champs. And now we get the Battle of Florida in the second round, and that should be bonkers because it was last year. So for people who may not have watched last year's series, because we had these divisional offshoots where you didn't have to watch anything that wasn't your own division, and certainly I don't think fans were. But yeah, the Battle of Florida is going to be ridiculous. And I don't know that Toronto necessarily would have beaten Florida if they beat Tampa, but just getting out of the first round would have been huge. So I want to talk about these 4 guys. And I thought about expanding it to others, getting into goaltending. I think that whether or not they bring back Jack Campbell, and certainly when I do the video on the path forward after losing the series, we can talk about money and how much they have to spend and what Campbell's worth. But there's been a discussion about whether or not Freddie Anderson was the problem. Now we're going to have the discussion about whether or not Campbell is a Stanley Cup playoffs goaltender. But losing against Vasilevsky, no shame in that. In fact, Vasilevsky here, Price here. This was Korpisalo in 2020 or Merzlikins. Korpisalo, I'm pretty sure. 2019, you've got Rask. 2018, you've got Rask. And 2017, you've got Holtby. The Toronto Maple Leafs have genuinely lost to teams that have pretty darn good goaltending. And I'm not saying that Campbell's the problem. I think Campbell played well. But you look at the level of goaltending they've been up against. They've never had a series where they're up against a questionable starter. You look at some of the teams going to the playoffs that had goaltending questions. Tampa Bay was not one of them. Vasilevsky, I still say, the best goaltender in the National Hockey League. If you're asking fans, players, coaches, who would you want if you could have any goalie in the league for a Game 7? Carey Price is still going to get votes because he's still Carey Price, even on one knee. But yeah, Vasilevsky's going to get a pretty big lion's share of that vote. It doesn't matter who you ask. I know the NHLPA vote and all that, and Vasilevsky got the vote there, but it wouldn't have mattered who you asked. Vasilevsky's going to get that. Now, Matthews gets a lot of criticism, but I thought Matthews had the best first round he's had. So he makes $11.8 million until 2024, and that's where things get tricky. The Leafs kind of need to do this over the next 2 years. You've got Nylander coming up in 2 years. You've got Matthews coming up in 2 years. And whether you think he's overpaid or not, odds are he may end up being worth more because the salary cap's going to be going up between now and then. So 2017, he had 4 goals and an assist for 5 points in 6 games. Pretty good debut. 2018 against Boston, they shut him down. 1 goal, 1 assist in 7 games. The following year against Boston, again, he had 5 goals and 1 assist. Game 7, of course, was tough for them that year. 2020 in the 5-game series against Columbus, 2 goals and 4 assists for 6 points. So again, decent round. The elimination games are a bit of a problem. 2021, 7 games, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. You want more out of him than that. And again, it's against Montreal. I understand it's Carey Price, but that's what you're paying him to get the goals he wasn't getting. This year in 7 games against Tampa, 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points. Again, against Vasilevsky, I'll take that. And if I had told Leafs fans you're going to get 4 goals and 9 points out of Matthews in the first round, I think they would have been happy with that total. Now, over his career in 39 games, 17 goals, 16 assists, 33 points in the playoffs. Is that good enough? Overall, probably not. But again, I thought this year he played well. And I didn't think that it was him that cost him that next round. I felt like Vasilevsky was finally Vasilevsky in Game 7 after not looking like Vasilevsky for the first 6. And then you got Mitch Marner. So you want to get into players that people say make too much money, you're going to get into Mitch Marner. These discussions come up quite often. I don't think Marner's as overpaid as others might think. It might be maybe $1 million. I don't think it's crippling. But for Mitch Marner, his playoff life, of course, has been, he's taken a lot of criticism. So 1 goal, 3 assists in 6 games in 2017, 2 goals and 7 assists in 7 games in 2018, 2 goals and 2 assists in 2019. This is where the criticism really ramps up for Marner. 4 assists in 2020, 4 assists in 2021. That's over 5 games and 7 games in those series. So that's 12 games, that's 8 assists. Marner's not a goal scorer, but you probably want more than that out of him. This year in 7 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, 8 points in the playoffs. And if you're of the mind that Marner's not a guy who can elevate his game in the playoffs, to this point, we haven't seen him being able to do that. In 39 playoff games, 7 goals, 26 assists, 33 points. Again, Marner's a setup guy. He's an assist guy, but you want more than 7 goals in 39 games from him in the playoffs. And again, that's where you get into the discussion of the $10.9 million he makes till 2025. That's only 3 years from now. So this conversation about the Leafs now, oh, it's all the same, it's got to change by at least 2024 and then really change by 2025. You've got Nylander, $6.9 million until 2024. I thought he had a pretty good first round. So 1 goal, 3 assists for him in 2017 in 6 games. 1 goal, 3 assists in 7 games in 2018. 1 goal, 2 assists in 2019. So to this point, we can definitely have that argument about Nylander not necessarily being worth the amount of money he makes right now. There was a costly turnover by Nylander that cost them a game in one of those runs against Boston. But then against Columbus, he had 2 goals and 2 assists in 5 games, respectable. Last year against Montreal, he had 5 goals and 3 assists, 8 points in 7 games. He had more points against Montreal than any of the other core guys. And then 3 goals and 4 assists for 7 points in 7 games against Tampa. And he had a lot of opportunities. He had a lot of rushes at the net. And there was just some bad luck, and there was some good goaltending. In 39 games, he has 13 goals, 17 assists, 30 points. So more goals than Marner, fewer points than both Matthews and Marner, but he also makes less than both. So it makes sense. $6.9 million till 2024. And again, maybe it's time to look at the core, but Dubas has made it clear he doesn't want to move anybody out of the core. He believes in this team. He believes in his guys. And one thing I've mentioned before is kind of feels like maybe Dubas is a little too loyal to his play. If that can be a thing, I sometimes think that the loyalty he's shown to these core guys might be holding them back. That maybe there might be other moves to be made. And again, I came out of last night's game with the same question that Steve Dangles got, which is they played really well against Tampa. What more could you have done? What more could have been done at the deadline? What pieces could you have added? What pieces could you have moved that would have made that outcome last night different? I don't have the answers either. But I will say, I was cheering for them against Tampa. And again, I know I saw the comments last night. There were a couple that basically said, Shannon's lying. He hates Toronto. He can't stand them. He doesn't want them to win. I'll come back to that. So John Tavares is of course, the fourth and the most popular target for people to say they should trade him. Makes 11 million as his cap hits 11 million until 2025. Now, as a Toronto Maple Leaf in 2019, 7 games, 2 goals, 3 assists in his debut against Boston. 2020 played 5 games against Columbus, 2 goals and 1 assist, and famously last year only the 1 game before he gets hurt against Montreal. This year, in 7 games in the playoffs, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. And he was one of their best players last night. So 20 games as a Maple Leaf in the playoffs, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points. Is it good enough? Probably not. But again, I thought he played well this round. I thought he played well this year. And it's just, my opinion has changed enough, and enough years have gone by since 2016 where I'm like, okay, they need to win this. And the other side of it, yes, it's true. Toronto, as the media would have told me in 2016 when I was making my complaints known, it's all about clicks, right? It's all about the fact that Toronto will generate a lot of interest. If Toronto had beaten Tampa Bay last night and I was doing a preview for Florida against Toronto, that would be the most popular series preview I would have done ever. It would have been the highest ranked, the highest, and there would have been downvotes on it, sure. But what I mean is, like, it would have gotten so many, like, I'm just ballparking 60,000. Ballpark 60,000 views. That would be my guess for a second round series featuring the Toronto Maple Leafs. But they don't get there. And now we're stuck with another summer of, I mean, people are going to take the victory lap against them, and the laughter and all the memes are going to continue. But there are some real questions here of whether or not it's time to look at Shanahan, Dubas, and Keefe and ask if there's an issue here. And if there's not, then the issue has to be on the ice. And if there is it in the core? If it's not in the core, if you look at these 4 guys and say they're fine, if you look at the goaltending and say they're fine. And I even saw the fans last night in the comment section saying, look, there's a good team here. They don't need to make any big changes. The Tampa Bay Lightning said, there's a good team there. They're going to win. But the problem is, these contracts are going to expire. We know from recent history there's no guarantee that a veteran player re-signs to stay with a team. There's no guarantee that, and one of them is right here on the board in this core 4, and that's Tavares. He was going to stay with the Islanders. That was the plan right up until it wasn't. So we'll see how long it takes before the panic sets in. And maybe next year's playoffs, they would be looking at those playoffs and saying, we've got to go for it. Because the good news or bad news, however you want to view it, is the Toronto Maple Leafs should still be a playoff team next year. 115 points this year. They could drop by 15 points and still make the playoffs next year. I can't see them not being a playoff team next year. And then we're having that conversation in 2023 about whether or not they're finally ready to win a series. And I'm sure they'll be, last night Mitch Marner said he's tired of it. He's tired of the discussion. But here we are. So hopefully next year, I'm really glad there was a video I was going to do the other day when they were up 3-2. I was going to do a video on how it felt different, as I did in 2018 about the Capitals against the Penguins. And the Capitals ended up winning that series, which was good because otherwise that video would have aged like milk. But I'm glad I didn't do that video the other day. I'm glad I'm doing this one today because it would have been, and he jinxed us and he cursed us and it's his fault. And so, yeah, I looked at that and I went, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. And so I didn't. But the relationship I have right now when it comes to fandom of who I cheer for and who I don't, I would like to see Toronto at least win a round. The Maple Leafs have been through a lot. Their fans have been through a lot. One thing that I've mentioned a lot on this channel too is that as years have gone by, I've become friends with fans of almost every team. So it becomes harder once you have a personal connection with teams through watching all their broadcasts, interacting with personalities who might be reporters, maybe social media, same as what I have going. And so it gets harder and harder to just, I hate all, but I like him and I like her and I like this and I like that about that team, and hate's gone. And that happens. Absolutely happens, right? Happens the other way around too, where you go, wow, the coverage for this team I cheer for is really not, it turns out it's kind of biased. I kind of like the coverage of that team. So, it all kinds of mixes together. And so how I felt in 2016 is not how I feel in 2022, which is how life works. It's that whole evolution. So I've evolved from being kind of angry and bitter, which I was just at life in 2016. I was very bitter about everything. Um, just you name it, I was bitter about it. But yeah, 2022, a lot more chill with everything, and just hoping that things get better in Leafland. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What needs to be fixed? Again, I'll come back and I'll do the standard like I did with Nashville. It won't be as long as this video, obviously. I'm not going to talk about, the channel and all that in relation. But yeah, I mean, obviously the channel had a big growth spurt with Vegas in 2017, 2018. Then it had one during the 2019 playoffs from St. Louis fans. But the initial boost that got the channel to around 1,000 subscribers and then beyond was Toronto. It was Toronto. Now, I do think that of my viewers, I think Toronto's the largest fan base. Vancouver would be a close second, though. When I look at videos, when I post them and view counts, Toronto and Vancouver will always get the most views. That's how that works. But again, I do cover all teams. This is one of those rare videos where I talk exclusively about Toronto. And again, it's because to me, there's that connection between that 2016 draft lottery and where we are right now. Where that draft lottery was about putting together the team that they have and the kind of records they're putting together, but the playoff success has not been there. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.